Resilient little thing, just like mama made you. No one needs to say.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I wanted to start by introducing myself because I find that that is an important step towards building connection with each other. It might be a little bit awkward, but I find that it prompts me to show up in a way that is open and willing to connect. When I moved to South Bend 5 years ago, I didn't feel connected at all. I didn't want to stay here at all. I moved here from a smaller city, and I was surprised to find that South Bend was missing some things that I expected it to have, some things that I needed. And I first noticed this when I sat down to make my Google map. So I've lived in a lot of different places, and one of the ways that I help get myself situated is I make a map, and I put my house at the center, and I plot out all of the things that I need for my daily life: my job, my kids' school, the nearest branch of the public library and the Aldi grocery store, and I mark out all of the nearest yoga studios. And what I was surprised to find about South Bend was, where is all the yoga? I was introduced to yoga as a teenager, and I thought it was stupid, probably because I was a teenager, but all through college and my early 20s, I also found myself coming back to yoga. Why? As best as I can explain it to you, no matter how I feel, yoga helps me feel a little bit better. It helps me process my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions, and it helps me show up as a better person and as a better partner and as a better parent. And when I showed up in South Bend in 2017, I had lots of thoughts and feelings and emotions of loss, of loneliness, and fear. I didn't know anyone here. I didn't have any friends. The job that I thought I was starting turned out to be a non-starter. And the day my moving truck arrived in South Bend, I learned that my mom, Norma, had terminal cancer, and 3 months later she died. I was lost in the absence of the things that I needed for my own self-care, for my own self-worth, and for my own self-identity. Nothing here was as I wanted it to be. Everything was disappointing. Every restaurant I tried, every volunteer project I pursued, every gray and cloudy day left me feeling dissatisfied and stewing in my own unhappiness. And to top it all off, I didn't have anywhere to go to do some yoga to help me deal with all of this. One day, I had a simple but profound realization, which was I can continue to spend every day frustrated and disappointed with what South Bend doesn't have, or I can take that same energy and I can put it into something more productive. I can help myself feel better. I can build what I need in this city. And since I still didn't have a job, I decided to build myself a yoga studio. I developed a mantra for myself during this time, which was that I was going to be not at home in 2019. I was tired of lurking around my own home, feeling sorry for myself. I needed to get out, and I needed to get doing. My mom was an entrepreneur, and she had a favorite quote that says, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And so I started doing, and gradually I got my boldness back, and there was power and magic in that. I found a home for my business in the Hubbard building downtown, which happens to be directly across the street from the same public library that I had pinned on my Google map 2 years earlier. And so, on February 28th of 2020, Bend Yoga opened its doors, and I was sure that I was not going to be stuck at home anymore. Now, we all know what happens next, but believe it or not, when I opened my business on February 28th of 2020, no one knew that the world was going to shut down and that we would all be sent home. But it did. And so after 2 weeks of business, I turned off the lights, and I took home my plants, and I cried. I cried because those early, isolated days of COVID lockdown revived for me all of the feelings of loss and of loneliness and of fear that had swamped me before. But this time, I wasn't alone in those feelings. There was a communal sense of loss and of loneliness and of fear. The difference for me was that I had worked through these feelings before, and I had come out the other side. And it all started to be a little bit less about me and a little bit more about helping others. As we slowly started to emerge from our houses, some people came back to yoga, and they looked sad and they looked scared. But after yoga, they looked a little bit better. On hard days, when I would complain to my husband that I don't want to own a yoga studio today, he would remind me why I needed to show up for myself and for others. These people coming to yoga had told me that this was how they were spending their COVID capital. It was the one thing they were allowing themselves to do outside of their own home. And I began to realize that these people weren't coming for the yoga. They were coming because they needed to find connection. They needed to find connection to themselves and to others. They needed to work through these same thoughts and feelings and emotions that had led me to open this studio for myself in the first place. I will always be grateful to the people who showed up in those early days. Together, we kept showing up, and connection grew, and it spread. And now it is the foundation of a thriving community of people. If you visited my studio nowadays, you would find that we intentionally cultivate connection. And one of the ways we do that is by learning people's names and introducing them to one another. It is sometimes a little bit awkward and it's a little bit bold, but there is often magic in it. In the past 2.5 years, I have witnessed so many moments of connection, ranging from the everyday to the kind that happen once in a lifetime. I watched as 2 people who met at my studio fell in love over yoga dates and just left to embark on a new life together. That is magical. But there's magic in the everyday connections too. And one of my favorite stories starts with a box of diapers. Carolina is from Colombia, and Granier is from Ireland, but they both live here in the same neighborhood. And they both had babies right at the start of the pandemic. Now, they didn't know each other, but they knew of each other. And so one day, Granier decided to leave a box of diapers on Carolina's porch as an act of kindness from one new mother to another. And Carolina appreciated this, but she also felt a little bit bad because she didn't know how to thank Granier. This was during the period of time when we were still quite literally distancing ourselves from one another. So this act of kindness was appreciated but went unacknowledged until one day in 2021, after I taught a yoga class, I saw Granier and Carolina sitting next to each other on a bench, putting on their shoes. And I said, I should introduce you two. Carolina, this is Granier. Granier, meet Carolina. And before I understood what was happening, these two women who didn't know each other, who I had just introduced, were wrapped up in a hug, and they were laughing and they were crying because they had finally been able to connect. The silver lining in all of this, for me, is that I now try to see absence as an opportunity. I understand that how I show up for things matters, that I am not alone in how I feel, and I can make things better for myself and for others. And it has gotten better for me. I have friends now. So I invite you to consider, what does this city need that you can offer? What opportunities for connection already exist in our community, but perhaps we need to show up in a way that is open and willing to connect? I think if South Bend doesn't have what you want, you should build it. Chances are there is someone else out there who needs it just as much as you do. Building doesn't always have to involve bricks and mortar and yoga mats. What needs building might be connection, an introduction, being bold. Because remember, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Thank you.